everybody, Ginger Zee here. Got my glasses on, you know it's getting serious. And this is Mel Griffin, both
Hey,
meteorologists here in the weather office to give you an update on Hurricane Irma. So now, as you've likely heard, made it to Category 5. It exploded in strength. Between the 8 and 9 a.m. hour, we got this update just before 8 a.m. that it went from 150, which is already very strong, to 175. Now we're at 185 max sustained winds with gusts to 225 miles per hour. This is a buzzsaw of a storm of the likes we really see close to the Philippines, not here. I mean, we don't see this often to this strength, to that distinctive an eye. It is 130 miles, now less than 130 miles east of Antigua. It is closing in on those northern Leeward Islands. The time to evacuate's over. There is no time any longer for these folks, and it's really shutting down from Puerto Rico up to Turks and Caicos. And we're going to be talking about that. There are obviously hurricane warnings in place. That's almost a given at this point. It is the strongest hurricane in the Atlantic Basin outside of the Gulf or the Caribbean Sea, so anything that's been east in all of recorded history. So we're talking about a very, very strong storm, and now the strongest since Wilma.
That's right.
In
So
2005.
So people, in Florida that haven't seen a hurricane like this since 2005 should really, start preparing and have an evacuation plan and get ready.
And I'm seeing, and we're doing stories tonight on World News that talk about visitors to these islands who are stuck there. They couldn't get out.
Right.
And so now their only choice is to sit through a Category 5 hurricane.
Exactly.
So it's important to watch where this thing goes and how quickly it moves. It's moving west at 15 right now, and that's why we've got all those hurricane warnings in place that Puerto Rico's included, that northern side of the Dominican Republic. The hurricane watch, that's only a function of time, not at all in strength, because we're just talking about you've got a little more time ahead of it, meaning in the next 48 hours versus the next 24. But impacts to those Leeward Islands start tonight, and then we'll go through the day Wednesday into Thursday as we get to Turks and Caicos. Turks and Caicos, I have to say this on camera, storm surge of up to 15 to 20 feet. Could see rainfall 15 to 20 inches. This is a low-lying island. I went there on my honeymoon. A lot of us have visited there. This is a horrific situation for the Turks and Caicos, specifically because of this. Watch this. You have a Category 5 hurricane coming across. Anybody that comes in contact within this cone is important. But along that line, wound winds, where you have the wind speeds up to 185 miles per hour, the right side, or as we call it, the northeast quadrant, the dirty side of the storm, is where you get that significant storm surge. And that's why you see those numbers coming out of a place spans, and now we're starting to see the turn north that we've been talking about for days. So as it slides north of Cuba, kind of kisses Cuba right there on the corner.
Touches it right there.
So heavy rains anywhere with any of the higher elevations will start to pick up, landslide or mudslide concerns. The southern Bahamas certainly, and then as it closes in, we are so worried about Key West, and the airport has shut down. We were just talking to friends who are stuck there because they can't get a rental car.
They had a flight on Thursday.
But that got
already
canceled.
closed.
My aunt's in Isla Morada now, trying to get her place ready and trying to get out of there. But impacts, timing's really important. Impacts for Key West, or all of the Keys really, would not be until Saturday night through Sunday. So I think that's really important, so everyone knows we're still talking about the weekend when we start to see impacts. And for Florida, it's Sunday into Monday when we begin to see those impacts. So as this track comes together, and it is kind of gelling as far as some of the computer models, we know Florida's in the crosshairs, 100%. We know that starts this weekend. We can tell you all of that right now. Which side of Florida starts to see the worst of the wind and all of that, that's going to depend heavily on the timing of a couple of things. You have that big high in the Atlantic that rotates clockwise, and so that's what's driving it south and west. Then you have this disturbance that's pushing down into the southeast, and actually it's a little farther north, but it's pushing down, and it's going to start making that turn. So that's what's helping to start turn it. These act as kind of gears that kind of shove it up and together. Here's a little troublemaker, a stationary front that develops off of a cold front, and that will slow the storm down. So even if it takes, and we've got one scenario here, a westernmore track, which would be horrible, either making landfall in the Everglades, worse yet, a Marco Island up through Naples, Fort Myers, Tampa, awful situation because you get really strong surge on the right side of that. This would still be bad on the east side. Heavy rains, still big time winds. This is only a 2-hour drive across the southern tip of Florida. So the expanse of where you're going to see hurricane force winds expands as we go northward with latitude. And that means that you're going to see hurricane force winds. If this is a category 4 right here,
you could see it across the entire state.
Correct.
So
across the entire peninsula of Florida.
About.
That's not a good scenario. This is not a great scenario either, although this starts to hug a little. If it were to go this far east and pull a little bit of a Matthew was a weaker storm. This would be much stronger, but it would give, at least the worst of it would be over the open ocean waters. Still, though, inland flooding, still storm surge, still big-time wind damage, and that rides up and tries to go into that Georgia/South Carolina state line. I wish I had 2 other scenarios.
Right.
I wish I had better scenarios to bring everyone. Those are the spaghetti computer model plots, and you can see how they've really, started to come together. A lot of them shifting a little bit more with that eastward track. But what I don't like to see is something like this, where it comes out to here, and then you get those really strong winds in that Marco Island or the Fort Myers Naples area, and then it comes across and it slowly makes its way. Because then you're having issues from Miami back to here. You're basically taking the entire side, and then you have heavy rains flowing around the northwest quarter and to Tampa Bay and the entire states.
And the problem is, where people that try to evacuate, I mean, where are they all going to go?
Yes.
So that's the biggest issue, is when you have a hurricane like this that's basically targeting almost the entire peninsula as of right now. Looking at these models, I mean, it's a matter of where to put everyone. And
where do you go?
Where do you go to get away from it?
And then it's happening, and then the rain is happening for a day and a half, and in different places. So I'm sure questions are starting to come in.
Yeah, they're starting to filter in a little bit.
We have a native Floridian.
Yes.
I have a lot of family in Florida. Everybody has been asking us a million questions
all day long,
specific to each city. And here's the sad part: each city is still included, especially the southern half of Florida, in this initial look. And I keep saying, I mean, an Everglades landfall would be
the ideal situation.
Ideal out of this. That sounds horrific. It's not ideal because there's still terrible damage on each side of it. But where you get those top wind speeds, where we saw the damage in Harvey, Rockport, Port Aransas, some of those towns that you saw demolished. When you have a Category 4, it's still considered catastrophic damage. You still have walls and roofs not making it. You have structures barely standing. Now, Florida has great building code. After Andrew,
that they basically redid the building code, and now all of these buildings are built to withstand, this kind of hurricane, but it hasn't been tested yet because they haven't had one yet. So that's the biggest issue right now is, what is going to happen now that one of these hurricanes could be threatening places like Miami. But even so, all throughout the state of Florida, I mean, just from growing up there and being there and moving up here, you can just visually see the difference in the way structures are built. It's unbelievable.
And there are places, like we were talking about, the National Weather Service in Key West.
Yeah, it's like a hurricane bunker.
It is like a hurricane bunker, so it's built to withstand a hurricane, and our Geo Benitez is going to be in Key West. We have people likely headed to the Bahamas or Cuba. I don't know that they've decided that yet, but Lindsay Janice is in Puerto Rico for us, and we're going to have all of this on World News tonight.
Yes.
Any questions that anybody's coming in with?
Really quickly, just
Hey, Jack.
Just very quickly, kind of starting, a lot of people are asking about Puerto Rico. Obviously, that's right in the track of it. A lot of people are asking, what's some of the advice for people who live in Puerto Rico? What should they do, especially, and also incorporating Antigua? There was a question about a woman has her son and daughter-in-law on honeymoon there. What can they do to best prepare for it?
Oh, so depending on, in Antigua, depending on where they're staying, I think being in the most sound structure, cement does well. Most of the buildings on islands like this, if they're in a hotel or a resort situation, they should have some sort of plan. I'm surprised that weren't able to get out. A lot of flights were added. I'm sorry to hear that they're still there, because I definitely would not want to ride out a Category 5. Antigua had some of the higher winds and surge, or not winds, surge and rainfall, I think, too. So electricity is going to be a problem. Airlines getting out going to be an issue. I think even more so than the current track with Puerto Rico, not to take away whatsoever from what's going to happen to Puerto Rico, but in the very near term and in the very near future, that Barbuda and Antigua, both in that direct, Barbuda even more so, St. Martin even more so, the U.S. and British islands, both in there. So I wonder can we zoom in here, over here? This will help you see what we're talking about with the right and the left side of the storm, which when you're talking about a Category 5, it doesn't matter as much. It does matter, but you don't want to be on either side of a Category 5, essentially.
Here's Puerto Rico, which ends up being on the better side.
The better side.
The better side.
But remember, you can have extremely heavy rain, and that eastern side of Puerto Rico, I know I've hiked there in the rainforest close to Fajardo, and that was, to see rain of that magnitude could be pretty damaging, and you'll still get significant wind issues surrounding that. Right. I think right now, can you see how far out the hurricane force winds go in the latest update?
Oh, yeah.
Because tropical storm force winds will extend 100+ miles, but sometimes the hurricane force is pretty tightly wound. I don't know what the latest.
60 miles out from the center.
60 miles. So if we were to measure 60 miles outside, that's where hurricane force winds remain, outside of the center. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people asking, obviously, you mentioned it a little bit before, but the state of Florida, a lot of people asking about specific towns in Florida.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say, we can't, obviously there's so many towns, there's
towns.
millions of people living in that state.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that the entire state should just be on standby for
Absolutely.
everybody?
Now, I'd say from a line from Tampa and Fort Lauderdale south, like if you drew that line across, that's where I'm first concerned. That's the immediate, more, Saturday night, again, the effects start in Key West, and then Sunday into Monday. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a really heavy rain shield that reaches eventually up through Orlando or Jacksonville.
Into the East Coast, right?
To the East Coast of Florida, no matter which scenario occurs. So yes, all cities should be on alert. I think that the ones in South Florida should first be concerned. And especially as we get closer, remember we are 5 days away from when this would start impact. As we get closer, you're going to be able to tell where 150-mile-per-hour winds could potentially be. We should be able to tell that tomorrow into Friday. Is today Wednesday? No,
tomorrow's Tuesday.
Wednesday into Thursday. We'll have
a couple of days to kind of narrow down this forecast.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people. People were saying my 92-year-old mother lives there, and she's just got admitted to the hospital. What are they going to do? I think the biggest thing to remember is that the officials there are going to make the best call. They're also going to keep it organized. If you have the ability and you feel like, I don't even want to take the chance, today's the day to do it, right? So to beat all the traffic, and if you have that ability and you have, family in Orlando and all of you want to head up to Atlanta for the weekend, not a bad idea.
Yeah, do it now. I mean, if you
but
can.
At the same time, I'm not taking away the possibility that somewhere within Georgia, somewhere within South Carolina, ends up getting that heavy rain shield by early next week. And so don't forget that we are still going to see the storm track northward. It will weaken significantly, but that doesn't mean, remember what happened in Matthew, it was just a tropical storm, and then we saw
some of the
dozens
severe
of deaths.
Flooding was in the Carolinas after
it rode along the East Coast and did damage to Florida. So lots of stuff could happen here, and we are, after Harvey, we've just been going my jaw this morning, when this hit 175-mile-per-hour winds, and then the gusts were 215, and I don't do that often because I don't get impressed by weather all that often. I am really impressed and terrified of this storm. So I'd say this was
amazing.
There's no better time. I told my aunt, she said, "Oh, free tolls in Florida." I said, "Aunt Nancy," and she's like, "I know, we're going to batten down the hatches. We're getting everything ready. They're doing it." And that's the best thing. I know that you Floridians, I know you know what you're doing. Just believe it. I guess that's the most important thing, right? That's what you have to tell all your friends.
Believe it and pay attention. Exactly. I'm like, guys, just it's happening.
Have that evacuation plan. And we're going to have great tips tonight, too, because you remember we're in this new time where people need to have backup battery for your cell phone. That's if cell towers survive in your area. And then you have to have battery-powered radios so that you know what's going on and you have communication in some way, because people in Harvey that did this just a week ago are reminding everyone this is what you need. It's much more than just water and food. You need to remember some of these other essentials, taking pictures of those documents that are so important just in case they get lost along the way. refilling prescriptions, because you can get that all done now. This is the stuff we have time for. So those are the things that I would focus in on with 5 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Since you still have time to get every preparation you possibly can
Yeah.
in there. So,
But you know what? We're going to be right here. So if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer. We're going to do these every day, I
Yep.
am sure.
I'm sure.
It's still, it's amazing to me that the one season that we start to get so crazy busy, I am pregnant and can't be at the
know.
storm.
You can't
It's,
be inside the
It's
hurricane.
the first, Harvey was the first time that I missed, and
And now
apparently Irma. I'll tell you what, my husband's happy.
Right.
He's
You're here,
pleased.
safe and sound.
Yes, here with you.
Exactly. Now
hope you guys-
now I get Ginger with me.
Yes,
So
I'm wishing everybody the absolute best. These islands we're going to be watching. We'll have the latest stories tonight on World News, and then I'll be back on GMA. But we don't leave this weather office in these situations. We got
No.
people here
it's
day and night.
round the clock coverage.
You've got coverage here at ABC. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.